your expectations for LSU football in the fall? It's a question that I've asked myself several times, and I'm sure you've asked yourself several times too, because it's a fair question to ask. With a new coaching staff, maybe a new quarterback, and with a barrage of new players coming in, either from recruits or the transfer portal, it's hard to kind of put your finger on exactly what we can expect from this LSU football team in the fall. But if you're a fan, you're at least hoping for high expectations. Now, today we're going to break down an article that I saw on ESPN.com, kind of mocking a 64-team college football playoff tournament bracket. We'll look into where they put LSU, and are expectations for LSU the same or different than what ESPN.com lays out? We'll take a look into that. Plus, we have a special guest at the end of today's show, so we'll get into that and more on Locked On LSU.
You are Locked On LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On LSU your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Caroline Fenton, and I am your host, as I am every day. I am an LSU alum, diehard LSU fan, and I am now a sports talk radio host in Nashville, Tennessee for ESPN 1025 The Game. You can follow me on Twitter at Caroline Fenton1. I post podcast updates. I post my LSU thoughts, my LSU takes, and just sports takes in general. You can get more LSU updates and podcast updates at Locked On LSU on Twitter, as well as on our YouTube page. So make sure to subscribe to our YouTube page, Locked On LSU, and you'll get notified as soon as these video drops, so you can get up to date with all of your LSU news whenever that drops. But like I mentioned, ESPN.com outlined kind of like this fictional 64-team college football playoff bracket, in classic big dance timing, and it's that time of year. We're all thinking in terms of brackets, so ESPN took it to a new level and made the college football playoff a 64-team playoff, which honestly, if it came to fruition, I know it's not feasible and I know it's not possible, and it would probably make the college football season last all season long. I wouldn't hate it. I wouldn't hate it one bit. But I want to break down what that tournament bracket looks like, this hypothetical fictional tournament bracket looks like. And are our expectations for LSU, do they align similarly to what other national broadcasters or non-LSU fans or college football playoff analysts may think? Now, first and foremost, to answer that question, we have to lay out our expectations for LSU football. For me, they are high, but not as high as it may have been, maybe coming off of the 2019 season, maybe coming off of the 2018 season, when we knew what to expect. Because in the 2018 season, LSU had a pretty solid season. They looked great. That Fiesta Bowl game really made you excited and optimistic for what was to come, because there were a lot of constants. And while LSU lost some of their key players, Devin White, for example, after the 2018 season, the quarterback remained the same, several receivers remained the same, the coaching staff remained the same. So you could have high expectations going into the 2019 season. And of course, whatever your expectations were, I'm sure they were exceeded in that season. But now things are different. It's not any sort of constant. We don't know who the quarterback is. It's a brand new coach, it's a brand new coaching staff, it's a brand new scheme, brand new players for the most part. A few returners, but for the most part, a lot of new players that we're going to see in 2022. So what are our expectations? For me, I'm, shooting for the moon at a 9-10 win season. And that's like shooting for the absolute moon. Like a 10-win season would be like astronomical for LSU. But this could be an 8-win team. This could be a 9-win team. And that's really kind of where I see this team's ceiling being. Because how high can you really reach for the stars if you don't know what to expect? And that's, reaching for me personally. Make a bowl game, have a solid fight against some of the top teams in the SEC West and Alabama and Texas A&M, and at least show hope for the future that this could be a 10, 11, even 12-win team in the future under the Brian Kelly era. But I'm hoping for the best, hoping that it won't be the worst, and going on from there. And I think that's how a lot of fans are approaching this, is excited for what's to come, excited for the newness, but can you really point your finger on how many wins this team can have? Now, I think that my expectations, for example, are probably much, much different, at least according to this bracket. So this bracket has Chris Lowe. He's an ESPN college football writer. He mocked this 64-team CFP bracket. He has LSU listed as an 8 seed, which seems pretty low, at least according to my expectations. The other 8 seeds, Florida State, Mississippi State, and Houston. I look at Florida State being a similar seed, the same seed as LSU, but I don't think that these teams have similar situations going into this season. Florida State was 5-7 in 2021, a pretty underwhelming season, 4-4 in the ACC. Florida State didn't do anything for me last year to say, "Ooh, wow, this is what I want my football team to be associated with." So that was a little bit of a red flag to me. Mississippi State, also an 8 seed. That's fine. Mississippi State had a fine season last year. LSU ended up beating Mississippi State last year. But, I mean, how much can you really take away from last year? Being the same seed as Mississippi State, whatever. Not great, not ideal, but I'm fine with it. The final seeding is Houston. Had a solid 10-2 record in the regular season. Defeated Auburn 17-13 in the Birmingham Bowl. Houston had a good season. And, of course, a non-Power 5 team in the AAC in 2021. But, good season. LSU being grouped among teams that are really, underwhelming. They're not making national headlines. They're not making, a super splashy college football playoff, hopeful kind of chatter surrounding that team. It's nothing special, average at best. So I don't love this college football writer, Chris Lowe, putting LSU amongst the ranks of those teams. But of course, we know what's going on inside of LSU's locker room and inside that team better than the other teams. But they also have LSU playing 9-seed Pitt, and Pitt defeating LSU and advancing into the tournament. Now, Chris Lowe writes this hypothetical scenario playing out like this. Pitt lost their star quarterback, Kenny Pickett, of course, the NFL draft, and their offensive coordinator, Mark Whipple, to Nebraska. But they did not lose Biletnikoff winner Jordan Addison, who was LSU's worst nightmare with 168 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns. If that's how things play out in the fall, letting a wide receiver like that, because that wouldn't be the only elite wide receiver that LSU would have to face in the season. So if they're letting this wide receiver, Jordan Addison, line him up for 170 yards, of course, in this hypothetical situation, you don't feel great about that. But I don't see how that plays out. In this situation, Pitt doesn't even have a quarterback. So to pick Pitt over LSU in this, of course, it's all a fake scenario. So it's hard to get caught up into all of this. But I think that this bracket is grossly underestimating what LSU can do in the fall, because although we can't lay out exactly what we think is going to happen or what we predict is going to happen, I think we can predict that LSU is going to have a better season than this past season, and they're ranked amongst teams that had very similar seasons to LSU last season. So this college football writer, not expecting any sort of improvement to LSU, and I just don't see how that happens. Now, in the same bracket, it has, in the national championship, Ohio State, a 1 seed, defeating Alabama, also a 1 seed, 34-30 in the national championship. So it really seems like they're going off of the norm, going off of, groundbreaking, Ohio State and Alabama going to the national championship. So I read these articles and I have to think, are the national writers not taking into account the immense improvements that this LSU football team could make in the offseason and the immense improvements that they can make in just Brian Kelly's first season? I'm not asking for a national championship. I'm not asking for an SEC championship. But I think just a little recognition that this team could make advancements in the 2022 season is all I'm asking for. But coming up next, it is Mailbag Wednesday. So I'll get to your questions that you all sent in. If you want to send in questions in the future, feel free to send those in on Twitter. Feel free to send them in on YouTube. However you want to get those questions in, make sure you get those in for Mailbag Wednesday. But we'll get into that coming up next. But before we do that, March Madness is upon us. I'm making the final little tweaks to my bracket, and I'm looking at it thinking, this is perfect. This is great. This is exactly how things are going to play out. And it never does. And that bracket is, I'm sure, inevitably going to be busted by day 1 or day 2. But It's easier to make your bracket, and it's easier to win some money with Stat Hero. Stat Hero's NCAA single game pick'ems pit the star players against each other in an amazing hybrid between fantasy and sports gambling. Take control back from those handicappers that always seem to have the advantage and start focusing on the players you know best with a gameplay that doesn't rely on big spreads or funky props or anything like that. In addition to their pick'em games, they also have dozens of lineups that you can comb through to take on head-to-head. They simply post sets of players that for you to take on with a set of players that you choose. Stat Hero is the easiest and fastest way to get your sports action fix. The simple, sleek gameplay will have you playing in minutes. That is what daily fantasy is supposed to be. So, if you want to use Stat Hero this week, I absolutely recommend that you take anyone on this Kansas Jayhawk team, anyone on this starting five, because Kansas has been absolutely lighting it up. So in the first round of the tournament, I think that Kansas is going to absolutely roll. So sign up for free right now at stathero.com/lockedon and use promo code LOCKEDON for a 100% deposit match. That's stathero.com/lockedon. Use promo code LOCKEDON for a 100% match. stathero.com/lockedon, promo code LOCKEDON. Terms and conditions apply. So this time of year, I've pretty much given up on all of my New Year's resolutions. But I mean, we're getting into beach season, we're getting into spring break season. So I really want to stick to my resolution to eat right. And that is super easy thanks to Built Bar. It almost feels like it's not really a resolution because I actually enjoy eating them. And if you like marshmallows, you got to try the puffs. You're missing out on one of Built Bar's best tasting bars if you haven't. They're the first protein-infused marshmallow. They're fluffy, they're marshmallowy, they're delicious, and they're not just a protein bar. They're a treat. They taste like a dessert because they're covered in 100% real chocolate. Puffs are a fan favorite. They've got great flavors. They've got churro, which sounds delicious. They've got coconut marshmallow. They've got my personal favorite, banana cream pie. They are delicious, and they're going to be your new favorite too. All Built Bars are covered in 100% real chocolate, puffs included, so they taste like dessert, but they're low calorie, they're high protein, and they can replace your candy bars with Built Bars. They're better, and they're better for you. A typical candy bar can be anywhere from 200 to 300 calories, but if you go to Built.com and scroll down to the macros chart, you're going to be blown away at just how good these are for you. Built Bars have only 130 calories, only 4 grams of sugar, only 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. So if you need a protein punch in the middle of the day to keep you full and to hold you over until your next meal, Built Bar is your one-stop shop. And they're delicious. They've got flavors like mint brownie, coconut almond, and all new for this month, white chocolate cookies and cream. They're delicious, and new flavors are coming out all the time, so give them a try. At Built Bar, they're all about the taste, and they make it taste delicious first, and then they pack in all the good stuff. They pack in all the protein and take away all the sugars. Not sure how they do it, but they pull it off every single time. So go to Built.com and use promo code LOCKED15 and get 15% off your order. Use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. Thank you for making Locked On LSU your first listen every day. So make sure to check out Locked On Bracket Breakdown. It's on the Locked On LSU podcast feed and YouTube channel. Chris Gordy, Andy Patton, and betting expert Lee Sterling give you in-depth breakdowns on every matchup. So make sure to check those out. If you haven't finalized your bracket yet, if you want to put some money on some of these games, which we will be doing for the rest of the week on tomorrow's episode and Friday's episode, I'm making my betting picks for the week for the tournament. So if you want to get in on some early betting advice, go make sure to check out Bracket Breakdown. It's on Locked On LSU's podcast and YouTube feed. But it is a Mailbag Wednesday. I'll get to as many of your questions as I possibly can because later in the show, we'll have a very special guest joining us. But first and foremost, one person asked a question and asked, who was in your bracket Final Four? This was kind of tough for me because there are a ton of juggernauts. I mean, even just picking an SEC tournament winner was hard enough, but picking a NCAA tournament winner is even more difficult. But in the very end, my bracket Final Four is Gonzaga, Purdue, Tennessee, and Kansas. Now, Purdue's going to have a really tough road ahead. They're going to have to beat Kentucky, and they're going to have to beat UCLA. Their bracket is incredibly difficult. I mean, I look at Tennessee. Tennessee is hot, and Tennessee is rolling. I mean, when they get that offense moving, they can beat anybody. They've got a top defense in the NCAA. I mean, what we saw from them in the SEC tournament just proves that this is a team that's poised to win and to go really far in the tournament. So I think Purdue and Tennessee are two of my dark horses getting into the Final Four, but it's almost inevitable that at least one's always going to get in there. I think with Tennessee's momentum and with Purdue's talent, I think they are absolutely going to be able to make it to the Final Four. But In the end, this isn't a very fun pick because I feel like this is what everyone picks, and I feel like this is what all of the national basketball talking heads pick. But I'm going to take Gonzaga to win it all in the end, which is so not a fun pick, but they're a great team. They've been poised to win for quite some time. So I'm going to take Gonzaga to win, but Gonzaga, Purdue, Tennessee, and Kansas in my Final Four. Another question. Do you agree with Will Wade's firing? And I think that's a really good question, and I think it's something that a lot of LSU fans have kind of gone back and forth about. Is, why extend this whole process if LSU knew about it since 2017, 18, 19? Why has he been coaching well into 2022? Just hold off until the hearing comes out and do what you need to do. Will Wade's brought this program so much success. A lot of people don't agree with the firing, but I do. Because clearly there was enough damning evidence in those notice of allegations, and LSU saw that we're at a crossroads of, okay, look, we can choose to fire him, and we can choose to, scrub our reputation as much as we possibly can. We can send a message to the NCAA and say, hey, look, we're going to do whatever it takes. And we are going to, we're going to follow your rules, and we're going to follow your advice, and we're going to do whatever it takes to make our punishment as little as possible. And I think that's the number one priority here, because some sort of, punishment from the NCAA kind of seems inevitable at this point. I hope not. I'm knocking on all the wood, and I'm crossing my fingers that that's not the case, but it kind of feels inevitable. So I do agree with the firing, just in order for LSU to kind of cross all their T's and dot all their I's and do what they need to do in the eyes of the NCAA. Now, am I sad? Yes. I loved Will Wade. This was such a fun tenure with him as head coach, but I do agree with it. And I think that LSU, to protect themselves, it was kind of a decision that they had to make. But final question today. Someone asked, what's your favorite part about doing the podcast? And I appreciate that. I always take personal questions as well. I think the favorite part about doing the podcast is being able to stay connected and communicate with you about LSU sports. It's something that I love so, so dearly. It's something that I'm so incredibly passionate about. And being a radio host in Nashville, while I love living in Nashville and while I love covering our local sports, I felt a little disconnected from my LSU people. I was watching games as a fan and being locked in on Twitter as well, but I wasn't really able to do a deep dive into the stories and deep dive into my takes and share them with you. So I think that's my favorite part about the podcast, is being able to reconnect with the fan base and reconnect with the teams that I've loved covering for so long. But make sure to get in your questions for next Mailbag Wednesday. I'll take them on all days of the week. Anytime you want to send them in, any questions that you may have about recruiting or LSU basketball or the NCAA tournament or me personally, whatever you want to hear, send those questions in, and I'll get to as many as I possibly can on Wednesdays. Now, coming up next, Chris Gordy, host of Locked On SEC, caught up with Jason Jaramillo, the founder of Stat Hero, and he discussed the NCAA tournament, how Stat Hero is a no-brainer for enjoying the tournament to its fullest potential. So make sure to check out Stat Hero. And here is Chris Gordy, along with Jason Jaramillo, the founder of Stat Hero, and how you can get involved with Stat Hero for the NCAA tournament.
Run along here, Locked On SEC, and man, we are talking all about the tournament, getting you guys ready. So much going on and so many different ways to get involved in the action. Look, there's gone are the days where you just fill out a bracket and then by Thursday night, your freaking bracket's busted, you're depressed, you're down to the dumps. So we figure we get somebody in here who might be able to give you another way to get involved with the tournament where, you can actually keep playing after that little sheet of paper you filled out is gone and done and dead with on Thursday night. And one of the guys coming in here to talk a little bit about other ways you can get involved is our buddy Jason Jaramillo from Stat Hero. He is the CEO of Stat Hero, and of course the app Stat Hero. You can find it in the App Store, and just go to stathero.com/lockedon is how you can find it on the website. But Jason, what's going on, man? Welcome in.
Chris, I love that Spanish twang you put on the last name, man. That sounded great.
Well, perfect. Glad we could get it right for you. Let's just jump right in, man. What are your thoughts on how the bracket kind of shaped out this weekend? Because look, there was a lot of things happened that were expected, but look, we cover the SEC. We were a little disappointed that Texas A&M didn't get in. We thought they did enough running through the conference tournament, losing to Tennessee in the championship game, but seemed like they had put together enough, but they get left out. But man, some big dogs up top with Tennessee and obviously Auburn and Kentucky and Arkansas. So SEC looks to be in pretty good pretty good shape here. But what'd you make on how the bracket shaped out?
Well, there was I mean, I'm going to even call him a dark horse. Before the conference tournament even started, I was all on board with it's easy to say now, but Tennessee was my team. Where's the love, Chris? Like, how did they not get a higher seed than they got? Is at least my take on it. Just looking at the bracket, right?
Yeah,
But
it
what are your
seems like they don't put any focus on like why are we playing the conference championship games if you're not even going to take into account the winners of that, right?
Yeah, like A&M made it to the championship, but no, they don't deserve it.
Right.
So yeah, I completely agree with you on that, man. But yeah, uh, that was probably the biggest one that stood out to me the most. For me right now, I don't see Auburn really moving that far. At least this is again my personal opinion. Again, like you said, A&M didn't get the bid, but yeah, those were both good. Both of my main calls, because Auburn lost so early. You don't really see in the history of the tournament on a team losing early going far in the tournament. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, it's a great point. And when you lose early in your conference tournament game, it's very rarely do you make it deep into the tournament. So for Auburn, they're really gonna have to dig deep. But they got the talent, they got NBA talent on that roster. Jabari Smith is a monster, and he can go off at any given moment. Jason, I want to get into it a little bit. I know everyone is so used to filling out their brackets, and then they get busted in the first weekend, and you're done. Let our listeners know what you guys have going on over at Stat Hero that could kind of make the best time of year even better.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So what we're doing at Stat Hero, we opened up about a year ago, and it's basically a hybrid between fantasy sports and a sports book. And that meaning you're playing the house one-on-one on our head-to-head matchups. What Stat Hero does is we offer lineups that you see ahead of time that you get to pick and choose who you want to play. You put your lineup in, you put your play in, how much, we'll match it, and it's one-on-one, you versus us. So it's pretty simple. And then we have a pick'em that's been really popular with the college basketball side of things. And how pick'em works is we give you two rosters, Team A versus Team B. So for example, if you look at Stat Hero, we have a lot of single games. So if we're talking, for example, we have the North Carolina game up against Marquette. We basically take two players, a two-player lineup on one side, a two-player lineup on another side, and then they face each other. And you basically say, okay, which team do I think is going to win? And then you basically pick that side and you put your play in, and that's it, you're in. So it's basically the fastest, easiest way to play DFS. A lot better odds than a sports book because you have to rely on that referee side of things and those bad calls and those bad beats. Now you're just betting on players. You're playing players. I'm rooting on two players to beat these two players. And again, it's getting a lot of traction. So that's what we're doing right now for the tournament.
I've been on the website before, and I've bet on the website. I actually just downloaded the app, so it's a little bit easier for me now to navigate the app because I'll be like when I first went to the website, it was a little overwhelming. Like you guys have so much stuff going on, but it's a good thing. Like you got head to head, you've got pick'em, you got parlays, you got survivor pools. There's so much to do. What would you recommend for somebody who's just getting started? They just downloaded the app, kind of want to ease their foot into the water. What's the best thing to kind of start with?
Oh, yeah, great question. We made the pick'em gameplay specifically for those beginners, for those people that aren't able to have the time to follow these teams, in detail, right? Sports betting, it seems like again, you have a 50-50 chance, but most of the time on a long-term basis, you're losing, right? I think the best sports bettors in the world are hitting 51-52%. On Stat Hero, on the pick'em side of things, our users are hitting 45 to 60% consistently. That's 4 times higher than the industry win rate of 15% on these bigger tournaments, right? So I would definitely say the pick'em side of things. The pick'em, all you do is you're seeing two rosters and you're saying, I think this roster is going to win. Boom, making my pick. You're in 2 minutes.
And it's a mix of roster, right? Like it's guys from all different teams on this one and on that one, right?
Exactly. So we have two different versions. We have what you just said, right? A bunch of different rosters. And then we do single games where we'll just take, if you want to just watch one game, we'll just use those use those players from that particular game, and we'll create two rosters next to each other.
It's very cool, and man, I mean, I think, look, yeah, I'm with you. I mean, you kind of get bored with just the same old, same old. Everybody's looking for something a little bit different, or something new. And with the game starting, I mean, we got the playing games going on, and then we got the tournament starting on Thursday, and there's tons of stuff going on. And do want to remind our listeners, you can go to Run Your Pool. I'm sorry, stathero.com/locked on. Stathero.com/locked on. Use our promo code locked on, and they've got tons of great stuff going on there. Terms and conditions to apply. But Jason, last thing I got to know is who's in your Final Four? Who are we picking?
Oh man, like I said, I'm a Tennessee guy right now. But again, how can you not? I'm just talking SEC here, but because I know that's what your listeners are more into. But I think Kentucky has a legit chance at making the furthest run. My heart says Tennessee, but looking at Kentucky, maybe the loss in the conference tourney is going to be a good thing for them. And they have the best draw, I think, being in the East, being the number one. So as of now, I think my heart says Tennessee, but my mind says Kentucky. I think they're going to make the biggest run in the SEC. Which again, is that a big prediction? I'm not sure, but we do, Chris. Before I sign off, too, I want to tell your listeners that we have a free pick'em contest that we're offering. That listeners for free can pick a side, and if they pick the right side, they're getting a free $25 on us. So all
Wow.
they got to do, if they lose, nothing happens. But if they pick the right side, go into our free plays on the pick'em side, and $25 to play with on us. So
That's very cool. And again, the app, I can't stress how easy it is. I mean, you just go on there, it's got all the sports, you pick which sport you want, and boom, you're in business. And stathero.com/locked on, the easiest way to get signed up and get in there. And Jason, it's gonna be fun, man. We're looking forward to it. Thursday and Friday, it is madness. Everybody's taking off of work, and you're just having some fun. And again, we'll still have our paper bracket, sure, but by Thursday night, I'm usually ripping this thing up and throwing it away, and I'm going to be on the Stat Hero app because this thing's going to be dead and gone with. So, Jason, thanks so much for the time. I really appreciate it, and man, we'll have to catch up again soon.
thanks, Chris. You're the man. Appreciate it, man.
All right, he is Jason Jaramillo, CEO of Stat Hero. Head to stathero.com. This has been Locked On SEC.
Thank you for making Locked On LSU your first listen every day. Coming up tomorrow, we'll take a preview at LSU's first round matchup against Iowa State and looking at their road to the NCAA tournament. And make your second listen Locked On NFL Draft for Ryan Tracy and former NFL cornerback Eric Crocker, bring the NFL Draft to life every day with insight and analysis on college football prospects and NFL front offices. It's free and available wherever you get your podcasts.